Welcome to all of you to our Voices of Leadership Studio Series. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. My name is Lynn Sprangers and I'm Vice President of Community Impact. The Studio Series was created by the Women's Leadership Institute at Mount Mary in support of its mission to inspire, educate, and support women as transformational leaders in service to their communities and to their world, because we think big at Mount Mary. We are fortunate to have an array of inspiring women who have brought their leadership stories to us, and it continues today. Our hope is that as you listen to the stories from these women, and we dig a little deeper into their lives and ask questions, and then take that inspiration and new learning and apply it to your own lives and your own decision making. The Women's Leadership Institute is a place where we like to say, potential becomes purpose. All of you have a great deal of potential, and the Studio Series may be just one of those ways to help tap that sense of purpose. We are thrilled to have an amazing woman with us today, and her name is Pat Pearman. She is the Executive Director of Oncology and Disease Solutions with GE Healthcare. That title doesn't even come close to telling you what this amazing woman has done over her life. But she's going to share that with us today, and you're going to learn more. Let me just give you a little bit of background on Pat and her current role with GE. She oversees its Healthy Imagination Disparity programs. Over 25 years, she's been with GE, focusing on closing the gap in equity and access to health care for underserved populations in the United States. Pat does amazing work in the healthcare field, but what you'll find is the other part of her story that is so wonderful is her sense of passion and empathy and how she is really living life to fulfill her passions. We're honored to have her with us today. Please join me in welcoming Pat Pearman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pat and I had a chance to visit, and I wish I would have had a box of Kleenex when she was sharing some of her stories with me about her life's trajectory. And we ended up at the end of our conversation where we discovered that Pat really said she had 4 pivot points in her life. And if we think about this in our own lives, if we look back, we probably can look at some really pivotal moments and say, wow, if that person hadn't come into my life at that time, where might things have been, where might things have gone, or might have gone differently, or maybe not as well, and that we're grateful for these people, and as we sort of look back, we realize that they were real game changers for us in our own lives. Pat's going to take us through some of those pivot points in her own life. And we're going to start with her family, because I couldn't help but notice that she is not a health sciences major. She was not in the area of on a track to become a doctor or a nurse. Her background is her father was a jazz pianist. So I think if Pat picks up the thread from here, you'll find out about how she might have been going down a different path at that point in your life, and your family and that musical talent. You had some of that talent as well, right?
Yes, I thought I'd be on stage for a very different reason than I am today. I had pretty much mapped out my life. I mean, I look around the room and I see all these incredible young women. And I had thought from the age of 7 that music was going to be my life. That I went up to my dad. He was a jazz pianist. He had played with people like Billie Holiday. And I told him, this is what I want to do in life. I was dead certain. From that point on, my dad kind of made sure I went to summer camps to study theater, that I learned piano and violin and clarinet. I mean, my life was mapped out. I was going to be on stage one day. And then I, got a little older and I started taking voice lessons and performing, and I had the opportunity to open for Dionne Warwick, and I went away to college and I had a professor who sat us down the first day and said, if you want to be on stage, you shouldn't be here. You should be in New York, and you should be attempting to live your dreams. And if you want to teach, if you want to share your talents, then stay here. And that was something I had never thought about doing with my music. So, I was Crane School of Music. It's a great teacher program there that they have, wonderful around education and how to use music to reach children.
And it was a little boy
It definitely
who was that first pivot point in your life, this little boy.
He was. This is Malik, and I had an opportunity to intern at Head Start. And Malik was a child who had been taken away from his mother. His mother was a prostitute, and when he was born, they said she would not be a fit parent, so they took him away. And his foster parents abused him and actually literally kept him in a closet for the first 3 years of his life. So when I encountered him, he was in a diaper. He could not communicate with other children. If there was any other kind of loud noise, he would run into the bathroom and shut the door because that was a safe environment for him. And his mother was fighting to get him back, his real mother. And what I saw was, first of all, I had to set aside my perceptions of, okay, so she's a prostitute, but she's a parent and she loves her child and she wants to make his life right. And I saw a person that was willing to do anything, fight her way through the court system to get back her child. And I used my music to actually begin to connect him to the other children and to the outer world. And it was at that point that I really understood what that professor meant about being able to use your music to create environments and to touch others. And I will tell you, the story of Malik has a happy ending. My older son was his first year going into his engineering classes, came home from his orientation and he said, "Mom, this kid came up to me and said, you were his teacher when he was in nursery school." And I said, "Well, what was his name?" And he told me Malik. So obviously Malik's mother did do the right thing and she made sure her son was gonna have a productive future. But that made me think about, did I really want to be on stage or did I really want to take my talents and touch the lives of other people? And at that point, I decided I did not want to be an entertainer. It was just an emptiness there that didn't fulfill me as a person and that I wanted to be able to touch other Maliks. So it was a major change in my life at that point. A disappointment, I think, to my parents to a certain extent, only because so much had been invested in my music career. But I think my mom, of all people, really understood.
And you learned an important quality that we talk about at Mount Mary all the time, which is empathy. And how much empathy is woven into any career calling, and how it can really, if you open up your heart and your willingness to, as you said, not see people through a usual prism, it can take you in a really, really wonderful place. Your next stop was in the insurance industry. So you were now, as you have talked about, embarking on a part of your career where you were beginning to see an industry that not only lacked women in leadership roles, but certainly women of color. So the next path for you was to really carve out a niche there. Share that story, and again, another mentor who came into your life in really important ways.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, this is a tough one. But I didn't, say I want to go into the insurance industry. I was actually really loving the work I was doing in Head Start. But I had my older son, and I felt like I was giving everything to the students in Head Start and not as much to my son. And I really wanted to be a meaningful part of his life, so I said, I think I'll switch from what I'm doing and I'll go into get a job in business. And the first interview I got was with a gentleman whose wife was a teacher, because a lot of businesses wouldn't interview teachers. They were saying, you're off in the summer, you're not used to working, full 8 hours a day. So they had a perception of a teacher's life, which was totally erroneous. For those of us who teach, we know. And so anyway, his wife was a teacher, and he felt teachers had great people skills, and that was something that was needed in the insurance industry. And so I got in the industry, and like anything else, I just threw myself into it. I wanted to, make a lot of money, climb to the top. And so I decided I needed to join a professional organization. So I joined a professional women's organization called the National Association of Insurance Women International. And the goal was to be able to provide a network for me to be able to advance my career. And in becoming a member, I met a young woman, Arlene DeSimone, who became the best friend I've ever had in my life. We really, truly were sisters of the heart. You know, we shared so much, and yet we were so different. That's not Arlene and I, but it depicts this card she gave me on my birthday. It depicts our friendship. And so what I discovered in being part of this organization was they had never had a woman of color as a national officer of any type. And Arlene and I talked about it, and I said, you know, my parents come from a long history of social justice, and I believe that no one should be discriminated against, and so I'm going to pursue that. And it took about 10 years to get there, and Arlene was with me every step of the way, and she was so practical. I wanted to get up and give speeches and use quotes from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and she goes, no, there's a Southern contingent, you need to get elected first. Once you're elected, then you'll be able to say whatever you want to, but the goal is first to get you into the system. And she was just an amazing friend, and halfway through this journey, she was actually diagnosed with breast cancer. And, you know, she underwent that battle for 5 years, but she remained such a terrific friend and advocate. And eventually I was elected the first African-American national president of this organization. And a week after that, Arlene passed away. And so it was a very bittersweet time in my life. And I remember that I needed to leave to go back to her funeral. And I was at a speaking engagement, and they had expected me to be there all weekend. And I explained to them I had lost my sister in many respects, someone who was just so close to me, she felt like a sister, and I needed to leave. And I think I was similar to I am right now, a bit choked up about it. And when I walked out, this woman gave me a tissue, and I thought, it's because I'm tearing up, and I didn't have a tissue. And I got to the airport, and I opened the tissue, and it was a breast cancer pin with an angel. And I never had the opportunity to really thank her for it, but it just really expressed, you know, the acts of kindness that happen that can really change your life. And my commitment to Arlene is that, you know, one day, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but one day I'm going to really dedicate myself to finding a cure or working with people who are working on finding a cure for this deadly disease. And that was another major pivot that then took me into GE.
And also, as you have expressed, kind of opened your eyes to the healthcare system. Your friend Eileen had good health care, and even though she didn't win that battle, she did have good health care, and how the system had these inequities that were just not right and didn't sit right with you. So you, as you said, you landed at GE, and you really plowed into the healthcare and learning and absorbing all that you could in terms of learning that industry. And you traveled. Your travels took you to Africa, and you said that that too was a very life-changing time for you. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what you did, the kind of work that you actually did there that was so pivotal for you.
Well, I feel that this was like an opportunity of a lifetime. And I had the opportunity to travel with our CEO to Ghana, West Africa, and the purpose of it was to go look at hospitals that we have been engaged in for a huge philanthropic effort actually being driven through our GE Foundation that bought technology and water systems and energy systems to rural hospitals across the country. And so it was a humbling experience in the sense that we're used to poverty in the US, but for those of you who have had the fortune to travel to countries in Africa or other places around the world, Cambodia, India, you really see such extreme poverty that you know that literally that every night that there are children who are dying, mothers who are watching their children die just simply because they don't have access to things we take for granted, clean drinking water, access to health care, access to food. And so as I was walking around, our CEO was kind of funny. He's like, we can do better. Pat, what do you think we should do? Okay, put that down. I had a list of 100 things by the time I left that I needed to do, but we're at Kamasi, and Kamasi is this rural hospital where there's literally, as you ride through, there's no roads. The homes are dilapidated shacks. And we went into the hospitals, and the bathrooms are worse than our outhouses here. And we walked down to see, the pipe that the drinking water came out of, that the children in the hospital, quite frankly, were receiving. And we went into the children's room, and I'll never forget that going into the children's ward, it's not like what you hear in our hospitals here, where you hear kids crying or you hear them laughing. It was just complete silence. And these kids are laying in these cribs, for lack of a better description, and they're just looking at you. And they're so hopeless, and they're so in need of help. And so there was a mother there, and her name was Nanaya, and I was talking to her about her child, and her child was sick. She had malaria, which is very common for many of the mothers while she was carrying her child. She looked at us with such hope that we were bringing all of this there. And she had walked for like 2 days to bring him to this hospital to receive care, and waited for even longer to get him in. And she just said, now he'll have clean drinking water. There's electricity here. He'll get to see the one doctor that's there that treats over like 100,000 patients, but he has something more than I can give him. And her spirit was just so amazing. And later on, I talked to the one doctor, and I said to him, how do you do this every day? How do you get up? And I'll never forget the quote. He said, always remember, to the world you may be one person, but to one person you may be the world. And I just thought, it's amazing. This is just so amazing. And I thought, I need to turn my talents towards trying to help eradicate these disparities, both here in the US, but also abroad. And I just thought this could be my life's work for the balance of my life. And this will be so meaningful in so many different ways.
What kind of work did you actually do when you were, our students here think about, our students have such a great commitment to serving their communities, wherever those communities may be. What kind of work were you doing?
We have the opportunity to do a few things. With our GE Foundation, we have the opportunity to really go in and work in these communities and understand what they really need, what's going to work. We had a lot of discussion with like the chiefs of the community, but the nurses who really know what's going on. And they take you to this graveyard of all these well-meaning donations, technologies that don't work because they don't have electricity to run them. Equipment that no one uses because they can't be trained, or there's no one there to service it. So you really begin to understand that they need really basic things. And so, just working with companies that can even bring, there's a company that develops a pill that they drop into water that makes it safe to drink, giving them basic prenatal kits so that, mothers have the type of things we take for granted, or after their child is born, they have blankets. There's a invention that is called the Embrace that you can learn about. But basically, we don't have prenatal. You will not find prenatal clinics in these clinics, or prenatal sections in these clinics. And this woman developed this blanket. It literally looks like a little sleeping bag. But when a child is born prematurely, the biggest threat to them is loss of temperature, and they die. And every time you touch that child, you compromise their health and you reduce their temperature. And she developed, it doesn't need technology, this sleeping bag type of invention that you literally put these preemies in that saves their lives. I mean, something so simple as that. And then some of the work that we've been doing recently is that working with the First Ladies of Africa. Our women are truly going to make a difference on that continent. And so many of them are heads of single households fighting for their daughters to be able to receive an education, which is not a given. So many of them actually are farmers. And we've been working with social entrepreneurs on how to bring investment there to help these women get the capital they need to start their own mini businesses. So that's some of the work we've been engaged in, but there's so much more. And so I would encourage anyone who has a passion for that to pursue it.
You said there were times too you felt overwhelmed because the problems were so big and you were just one person. But again, the idea is just get started, right? Find what you can do and get started.
Absolutely. I mean, I was a music major. So no one would think that I would be in Ghana or Nigeria or Kenya talking about social entrepreneur and how to bring venture capital to it. I mean, I think if you have a passion, you will learn what you need to learn. People will give you that opportunity if they feel you're authentic, if they feel you're sincere. If you're just there to bring the big check or to be in the photo op, then they're going to be able to figure that out rather quickly. It's amazing to me how many people who really want to connect with women and organizations on the ground in Africa who are social entrepreneurs and want to make sure that they're investing the right way, or are working, want to be connected with an NGO that's really doing the right thing on the ground, will reach out. And so I just think it really starts with authenticity, and if you're passionate about it, the rest will come. You can learn. You can learn.
Well, and you think about the ideas you said that women are leading in their own ways, even with nothing economically measurable, and yet there was this hope, and that there was this kind of unbridled sort of joy that they felt seeing progress, even small progress, that we sometimes can be cynical about back here in the United States.
When you wake up each day and you're wondering how you're going to feed your children, how you're going to make it through the day, will you make it through the day? Will your children make it through the day? Will they make it through the night? It's pretty basic. It comes down to things that we probably don't think about. When I had my son, I was thinking, what bunting outfit am I going to bring him home in? And, checking out pediatricians and things that never entered my mind. How will I feed this child? This is my third child, and I can't feed the two I have. What am I going to do to sustain us? So it comes down to really basic things, which means that you don't have to be a genius to figure it out. I think we all have those instincts of how to really survive.
And you also talked about being willing to listen and hear, that you can come in with really great intentions, and yet if you aren't listening and hearing what the folks who have that need are saying, you don't really help. You don't really move that. There's not really progress in the way that there needs to be progress.
I would agree. From that perspective, I can even give you an example here that we can all relate to. We did a program a year ago with the Metropolitan Breast Cancer Task Force in downtown Chicago. From the perspective of looking at mortality rates in 5 zip codes on the south side of Chicago, African American and Latino women have a 65% greater chance of dying from breast cancer. And we really wanted to understand, why won't these women go get screened? There are plenty of services. Are they fearful? Do they not trust? And so in order to really understand, we worked with a company that had really grown out of the community. And what they did was go in and help the community deal with major public health issues, whether it's violence, drugs, teen pregnancy, and have them understand they need to take ownership in how they do that. And we worked in their network to go in and talk to women ages 25 to 55 to try to understand why they wouldn't get screened. And it was everything from cancer is still very much looked upon as a taboo. It's not anything that you talk about. Many of them had members of their family that had died from cancer, but they felt that they wouldn't get the appropriate care. They had gone to get screened, and the way they were treated and looked at when they walked into the radiology services really was, to them more of a put down, and they thought, I'm not going back, even if it meant risking their lives. So it wasn't what we thought. It wasn't that they didn't have access. Many times they had access. It was the way that people made them feel about taking advantage of the services that oftentimes was a major turnoff to these women.
And you take us to today and your life now at GE, and again, reinforcing why you made the right decision to make health care your life's passion. Having another difficult medical challenge facing your family, your mother in particular, that has brought you to a new passion. Let's talk a little bit about what has happened to your own family in a health way.
So my mom, this really incredible woman, as I said, she had this horrific accident when she was a young child, and she was told she would never be able to have children. She had 8. Let's go figure.
Watch me,
she said. And she always wanted to be a nurse. She went back to school after having her 8 children and studied right alongside of us and dedicated her life to really working in geriatrics, working with patients who kind of have been left behind by their families because they had dementia. And at 57, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So she knew exactly what was going to happen to her. She knew that she, over time, would forget the memories of her life, and she also knew that over time she would forget my dad and her children. And it was very, very difficult. And because I worked in and around healthcare, I think my dad relied on me a lot more. I became kind of the secondary caregiver. And so my dad and I watched that decline over the years. And so I had a chance, being part of Healthy Imagination, to join a brain health effort around neurology, really understanding the brain, 2 years ago. And I jumped on it. I just thought it was a great opportunity, and it was something I was personally passionate about, having watched my mother go through that. And I had started a study 3 years ago with a very good friend of mine, Carol Evans at Working Mother magazine, to try to understand the impact on women today who have to be caregivers. We know that 90% are caregivers. We also know that the majority of Alzheimer's patients will be women. So it's a major, major issue. And we wanted to look at it in today's reality of having a family, working, what was it like on the ground? And it was interesting. It opened our eyes. But the one thing that came out of that is that women were just as committed to their families as ever. 85% of the participants said no matter what, they intended to care for their loved one at home or in their home. So they were going to be there to the bitter end. And so a year after we completed that study, my mom passed away. And so a couple months after that, Carol called me and she said, I just want to let you know we had a discussion here with the Working Mother Media Board, and we're going to dedicate the research and the study to your mom. And they sent me this photo that you see there, which to me was coming full circle. It was, I think, everything that my mother would have wanted for me, to use my talents the right way, to really help to impact other people's lives. And at the same time, it was something that helped me feel like I was doing something in her name that really meant a lot. So
I think she's very proud.
I
think
hope.
we would agree on that note for sure. Very proud, yes. You have really underscored how we have to sometimes be willing to move out of our comfort zones, or you'd probably still be somewhere playing an instrument or singing and being probably quite fabulous at that. But when you think about the path that you have taken, and you're not done yet. I know that. You're going to find a fifth pivot, and we'll invite you back to share with us that part of your life. But I think what you're saying, Pat, is that if you hear and you listen and you hear, those voices and those folks who came through your life will guide you in ways that you may not have expected, but the results are usually pretty incredible.
I would say that, we all start down a path and we think we're relatively certain what we want to do. Sometimes we don't. I was one of those folks that thought I really knew what I wanted to do, but this thing called life happened, and it threw a lot of curves, and I could have said, I don't care, I'm not going to change my mind, I'm not going to go down that path, and I would have missed meeting some incredible people. I look back and I think about Malik, and I think about Arlene. She's, as I said, she's someone that, when I go out to do something around cancer, I always say, Arlene, this one's for you. I think about my mom, and she used to always say, do the things that I always wanted to do, but never had a chance to do. And I think she would want me to use those talents the right way. Had I ignored, I think, those very obvious signs that you need to go down this path, not that path, I would have missed all of that. And, while I think, you say there are things that you've done that are incredible, for me, the people that I have met, the richness that it's added to my life, has really given my life meaning. I think we always hear, do things that you're passionate about, do things that will make your life meaningful. But when you're young, sometimes you don't know what meaningful is. Your definition of that is very different. I can look back now and I can say, wow, now I really understood what they mean when they say, do what you're passionate about, make your life meaningful. It may not bring you fame, it may not bring you money, but it certainly will bring you lots of joy. And you'll meet some incredible people and have some wonderful experiences.
See, it's the students in the room that I always tell you to get off those earbuds. You're missing life's parade.
Absolutely.
I tell those of you who stop in my office, and you know who you are, that it's really important to be hearing those conversations around you, because you never know where that can lead. It's really,
Absolutely.
It can take you down some really great paths. Well, we are going to wrap up this portion of our studio series. And we always close our program before we bring our audience in for some questions with a questionnaire, Pat, that it's been adapted many times over, perhaps most famously by James Lipton on Inside the Actor's Studio, for those of you who have caught that program. Our Mount Mary version, however, comes to us as a collaboration between the Women's Leadership Institute and our students in the Communication for Mass Media. And they are quite fun, and they are intended to be easy, and they offer another glimpse into the heart and soul of Pat Pearman. Pat, are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be,
All
I
right.
guess. Don't know what to expect, but I'm ready.
Describe your life by using only a song title. You're a music person. You're dialing. Or you've got a lot of good... Overjoyed. What is your biggest pet peeve?
I have so many. Let me think about this.
If you hope to work at GE someday, listen up.
Actually, it's when my husband doesn't follow the directions I gave him.
Doesn't happen in any of our homes either. Oh.
GPS has really eliminated a lot of discussion in our house.
What is the most unique class you have ever taken?
Communication judo.
You must elaborate on that a bit.
Nothing like it sounds. It was a course that was actually run by a psychologist, and she was married to a baseball player, and I don't recall his name. But she started off the course by saying things in life are not fair, and she used the example of her daughter being in high school and not doing well in her biology course, which she needed to graduate. And she's like, the teacher doesn't like me, and she made all these excuses. And in essence, what she said is you can either waste all of your time and energy on why you can't do something versus trying to figure out what you need to do to just get past that roadblock and move on. And it has been not only a course, but really advice that I've used a lot in my life.
Wonderful, wonderful. What is the most non-essential item you tend to always carry with you?
I would say a notebook.
So even with all of the technology, you still like to write things down?
I do.
What profession other than your own would you most love to do?
A cook, an Italian cook. I would really love to go to northern Italy and learn how to cook.
Wow. And maybe your own cooking show? Yeah.
I wouldn't mind.
Food
I
networking.
really wouldn't.
There's that next career we were just talking about. Yeah. And now we'd like to open up the floor to questions from you.
Hi, Pat. My question for you today has to do with adversity. And you have had a really diverse background, all these different things that you've done. And I'm sure that when it came to learning and changing direction and adjusting to all these new career paths, that you came across a lot of obstacles. And I'm wondering, for all the ladies in the room here, when we come up against obstacles in our education or as being a woman or being a professional even, what are some of the ways that you've learned to weather adversity?
It's a very good question. You know, and it's a constant, it never goes away. I was in budget reviews last week, talk about adversity, so we deal with that on a regular basis. I think you have to figure out whether you want to win the battle or win the war. And the reason I say that is that there are times to stand and fight, and there are times to walk away, figure out your strategy, and come back another day. You know, if it was something that was extremely meaningful for me, I was fighting for a program or a person that I really wanted to get across the importance of something, of doing this, if it meant, you know, the life of a child, then I thought, you know, those are one of the things that I would stand and fight. And if I lost, I figured out a counter argument to come back. But if it was where someone disagreed with me, I would step back and I would say, are they disagreeing with me because they don't understand what I'm trying to communicate? And that's maybe my responsibility. I haven't done a good job in really explaining the significance or the importance of what it is. Are they disagreeing because they're fearful? You know, am I threatening their territory or something that will reveal something about them? Or am I disagreeing because they're a jerk? And, you know, if it's the last, I would say, well, is there some other way I can work around this? You know, because you're gonna run into people who just want to be disagreeable.
Your whole life.
Your whole life. And sometimes you're not going to be able to reason with them, but you may figure out another strategy of how to accomplish what you want to accomplish. But from that, you learn what it is that helps you to be successful. I mentioned communication judo, and the reason that I mentioned that is that the true lesson in that is that there are going to be things that you're not going to be able to control, that are controlled by others, but that are going to be important for you to be successful for whatever it is you're pursuing. And if it is that important and you are running into roadblocks, you're going to have to figure out a way around it. And as the professor explained to her daughter, you only need to pass this roadblock once and then you're on to get your degree. You know, just recognize that, you know, once you get over that roadblock, you may not have to encounter it again. You know, and then there are times that you're just going to have to lose. You're going to lose the battle. And you're going to have to be okay with that. You're going to have to be able to say, I gave it my best. I know I explained it. I talked to everyone I should have talked to. Why can't they see what I see? Why aren't they as passionate as I am about this? But for whatever reason, the timing's not right. And I think in retrospect, when you look back, you kind of understand that, recognizing it wasn't you, but rather the environment and the set of circumstances. So.
And learning from your failures. You learn way more from
Oh,
where you
absolutely.
fail than where you succeed sometimes, because you really do double back. But there are still those dim bulbs who will never get it.
Well,
And you have to
always,
know that too.
always, but I think over time you get smarter about that, and you get better prepared and you're able to better assess what you really need in order to accomplish your goal. And you build your support in advance, so you're never caught off guard, or no one is ever caught off guard, and you've got your advocates with you. But it's just part of living.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Pat.
Hi.
I was wondering, when you were talking about the pivotal moments in your life, you said that you had come across Malik. Do you think that if you had never come across him towards the beginning of like the end of your music career, or the beginning of your GE career, that you would have been here where you are today if you had never come across him?
I probably wouldn't. I'm not sure. There might have been, you never know if you've never traveled that path, would your life never had changed. So I'd like to think that at some point I would have become the person my mother would want me to be today. It would have been less about me. When you're pursuing the life of entertainment, you have to have a huge amount of confidence. It has to be about you. My husband's the complete opposite. He was in a seminary. It's all about people. And people oftentimes shake their head and say, the two of you have been married 41 years. Oh my goodness, how does that work? But when I was studying my music, it really was about my music and about me. And I think to a certain extent, I didn't see the broader world. And I think in many respects, Malik helped me see the broader world. I mean, when I look back, I would have never probably worked with children who were underprivileged. I'm sure I would have not worked with someone who was a prostitute, and gotten to know them and went to their home and really talked to them about their hopes and dreams. So I think I might have gone down a different path, but I would hope at some point that I would have pivoted and realized that life's got to be about more than just yourself.
Quick follow-up to that. Do you think that by your son coming across Malik when he was entering college, do you think that really kind of helps spur you on into the role that you are now?
Well, I was well on my way to doing other things, but I was happy to hear how his life had turned out. It's amazing when you intersect with other people and you're in and out of their lives so quickly when you think about life in its totality. And I mean, I would have always hoped that his mom would have gotten him back, which she did, but that she would have stayed straight and that she would have made a difference. And for me, it was wonderful just to hear that he was going to college, that he was going to be an engineer. Obviously, he had done well in school to be, in an engineering class. And I figured his mom and grandmother had a lot to do with that. So it was just really nice to see that, because oftentimes when that happens to you in life, you never quite know where that person ends up on the other end.
Thank you.
It was nice. You're welcome.
Well, my question is, you've obviously encountered so many different people in your life, and we talk a lot about empathy here. And my question for you is, keeping in mind that empathy that you possess, how do you kind of separate yourself from the hard stuff? How do you encounter these people going through horrible things and be able to kind of step back at the end of the day?
I don't know if you ever say you can separate yourself from that. I mean, I think our empathy is what makes us who we are. And, there are times when I will go home and talk about, situations that I've encountered. I think my empathy, quite frankly, makes me a better business person. When we first started to talk about disparity in GE Healthcare, we're a business that deals in healthcare. I remember having this dialogue with our CEO and him saying, gee, I didn't realize that existed in the US. And having the opportunity to really open his mind through empathy, quite frankly, by the stories of inner city women struggling, to get access to health care, high mortality rates even in the US, in the African American community, really was, I think, was more empowering than if I had put up charts with stats that, okay, these are the mortality rates, these are the outcomes. So to be able to do that and to introduce him to what I would say non-traditional partners, non-traditional organizations that work in these communities every day so that he could have a feel for it and really become committed to it and support it from a business perspective, I think it actually was an additional ingredient. And I would say no matter what field you go into, you bring that with you. It really is who you are. And I can remember our CEO gave me a call. This is a funny story. And he wanted me to go down into the inner city to look at a clinic. And he said, quite possibly we can donate, some technology or whatever. And I'm driving and I'm looking and I'm lost. And, finally I find this clinic and it's like right next to this chicken place. And I walk in and there are piles of electronic medical records and, I go into the director's office and there's just stuff everywhere. But what they do is they provide care 24/7 to gunshot victims, to victims of violence. And I think what he learned was that this is not our big academic accounts, but these people need help. And I think it was kind of sympathizing him by using empathy and stories that made him aware that these things are right here in our own community. We just need to be sensitive to them. So I'm not sure it's something you can separate. I think you figure how you use the talents that you've been given to really be able to help and to leverage those in really positive ways.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As we wrap up our time here with Pat, some of us have had the distinct pleasure of being on your GE campus to partake in some of your design thinking, which is obviously such a definer of the kind of company that you work for. And Mount Mary has declared itself to be a creative campus where we are infusing creativity across the curriculum and in our extracurricular as well. And trying to bring down the walls between departments because we know that counseling students learn from fashion design students.
Absolutely.
And if you can just help us as we sort of close out today to talk about how that design thinking, that willingness to see how creativity and leadership and compassion and empathy can all intersect and really get you to this very cool place. You've obviously been doing that for more than 25 years at GE.
And today it's something that the company is doing across all the business units. It's something called FastWorks, and I'm not sure you've heard of it, but GE is a wonderful company. We have great global design. I have the opportunity to work with Carol Schillinghall, who I know has spoken here before, and they think differently. But what a company like GE wants to be able to do is, while we have all these wonderful processes and great technology and scientists, is to be able to harness creativity and innovation in a way we've never been able to do before, and to really learn very rapidly as to what makes sense and what doesn't. And so there's this new process called FastWorks, which is being implemented. In fact, Carol and I are on a FastWorks project that's looking at the area of brain health and how do you tackle neurology if you're a company like GE, and where do you tackle it? And it's bringing in the entrepreneurial spirit. And if you think about a startup, they're lean. They, quite frankly, look for areas that are unexplored, the white spaces, or they look at existing areas and they look for ways that you can actually create new markets, like Uber right now in the area of transportation. And so the whole impetus behind that is that while it's great to have the scale and the depth and breadth, you will eventually lose in the marketplace if you don't find a way to be innovative and creative, but be able to do that in a very fast-paced environment. And so this new process is really becoming an operating rhythm inside of the company in very small units. And, I would encourage all of you today to think about, ways that you can bring innovation, regardless of what your passion is, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in engineering, whether it's in education, whether it's in working with nonprofits. There's always opportunities to discover the white space. And there's always needs, whether you're in a structure company like GE, or whether you're working in a government organization, as we see outside of the US in many of the healthcare projects that we're involved in. But that innovation is what you're trying to capture. It's like what Edison tried to do with the light bulb. And if you think about that little sparkle inside of the light bulb and how many years it took him and how many failures before he could really capture that spark, that's really what innovation is all about. And I would encourage you not to lose that as you leave Mount Mary and this protection here. Don't lose that because that's what companies, that's what governments, quite frankly, that's what the world needs to really advance. So
we're on the right path.
we're on the right path, and don't lose that innovation, sparkle, because it's really what's going to lead to the future and a better tomorrow.
Wonderful. Will you please join me in thanking Pat Pearman? She has really lightened up our room in a special way today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We also want to thank all of you for being here today, and we want to thank our student advocates who work with the Women's Leadership Institute all year long, and they help make these programs successful, doing a lot of the things behind the scenes. And we want you to be sure to follow the Women's Leadership Institute on social media and also on our website for information on our next studio series, which will be, our guest will be Gretchen Mead from the Victory Garden Initiative. Thank you once again. Thank you to Pat, and have a wonderful day.
Yeah.